कलये सुन्दराकारं सदैकप्रियदर्शनम् अज्ञाननाशकं देवं सद्गुरुं मुरलीधरम् मुरलीमण्डितकरकमलं मुनिजनमोहनं यत्यस्तपादं वनमालाधारिणं प्रेमभक्तमण्डलनित्यकीर्तितं प्रेमिकवरदम् आश्रये Sadguru Maharaj ki jai. The immense blessings of our beloved Guru Maharaj, Maharanyam Sri Sridhara Swami, and by the causeless mercy of Sri Madhuri Sakhi Sameta Premikavarda Thakurji, we are all very fortunate to be a part of Bhagavata family, and the name is self-suggestive. When the family values, when the personal values, when our outlook towards life is aligned to Srimad Bhagavatam's values, Srimad Bhagavatam's tenets, Srimad Bhagavatam's guidelines, then we are indeed a part of a Bhagavata family. And all this is possible not by propaganda, not by self-reading. Truly, it is possible only with the blessings of our beloved Master. And it is clear that we are all blessed by our beloved Master because it's not easy, it is not natural, okay, to be attracted towards higher values of life, to be attracted towards higher relishes, rasa of life. And generally, we find in the world, this is an example given by our own beloved Master. Generally, the gossip tabloids, they actually sell more than a very refined newspaper that gives positive analysis or which gives positive news, or even rarer, a spiritual magazine is obviously going to find subscribers not so easily. Why? Because that's a fortune. It is like a pyramid. The bottom of the pyramid is the majority of people. As we go above and above in finer aspects of life, in finer aspects of values, etc., we find that it tapers off, right? The pyramid starts pretty much broad at the bottom. As it goes above, it tapers off. And this is the area where people like us, people like you all are, who have this tremendous taste for divinity, taste for higher rasa, religious, taste for finer aspects of life, etc. And so we are very fortunate, and it is right on our part to start with the gratitude to our beloved Guru Maharaj and to our beloved Bhagavan. And in our sampradaya means in our tradition, we don't see our Srinivasa Perumal, whom we all know, different from our Thakurs. Srinivasa Perumal is Premikavardhan is Srinivasa Perumal. So let us prostrate to our beloved Guru Maharaj, holy feet, and also to the feet of Srinivasa Perumal to help us relish this wonderful rasa of Bhagavatam. And after talking about very hard philosophy, which is also important, we need to build the base of the finer aspects of devotion with the base of philosophy, Vedanta. Vedanta means the end of Vedas, the final fruit of Vedas. And the end of Vedas is obviously experiential knowledge or philosophy put into experiential practice. It's a little long-winded, but we don't have an equivalent way to explain it. So that's Vedanta, and Vedanta means philosophy. We should know why of things. We should know the structure of things. For example, many of you, or almost all of you, I'm sure, regularly do Nama, regularly read Bhagavatam, regularly listen to Bhagavatam. We should know why we are doing all this and what is the final end. Otherwise, it becomes a little difficult for us to sustain. So the end of all that, why we do it, etc., is defined by philosophy, Tattva, or what we call as Vedanta. And we follow a Vedanta which is in line with Bhakti. It is Bhakti Vedanta, where hardcore knowledge and experience is intertwined with love of the heart. Okay. And so why we do all that, by now I'm sure you're clear. The whole purpose of human existence is happiness, and that happiness happens in our heart when there is a heart filled with love. And that filling of heart with prema and ananda is the goal of any spiritual tradition. And it is very refined, it is very structured, it is very diverse in our Sanatana Dharma. And in Bhakti Marga, in the path of divine love, what we do is we tend to gravitate towards the state of love and towards the state of Ananda. Ananda means towards the state of bliss or joy. More naturally, in form of listening to the Katha of Bhagavan Sri Krishna, who is none other than that which we call as Brahman or Paramatma or Bhagavan. We already discussed this many times in the past, that God is a very Western term. So that word God, I don't know what they mean, but here in Sanatana Dharma, we have various aspects of that one divinity. And that's what we discussed, Brahmeti, Paramatmeti, Bhagavan, iti Shabdyate. It is there in our second chapter of Bhagavatam. And here today, I thought we will discuss, in line with Bhakti, how Bhaktas and our Acharya Purushas, the people who are teachers, who are gurus, they, in Bhakti Marga, they necessarily are Rasika Acharyas. You all know what Rasika means. Rasika means one who relishes the various finer, rasas. The act of relishing is also called relish, and the actual object which is having the rasa is also called relishna. So that rasa is also called relish. So sorry if it looks like an oxymoron, but our Mahatmas, our Sadguru Maharaj, our Acharya Purushas are the ones who are also the relishers of relish. Okay? So they are the ones who relish these. They are rasikas to an extent that being a person of fine taste spills over to their day-to-day activities, the way in which they clothe, the way in which they talk, the way in which they interact with people, even the way in which they speak, the way in which they listen, the way in which they do puja, everything has rasa. It is very fine, very beautiful. In fact, it takes a very discerning eye to be a rasika of all these things. You see. And so there are many in our satsang who have that trained eye where they can catch the lovely relish, the lovely bhavas, and the lovely acts of celebrations our Sadguru Maharaj does when he does a puja or when he does a utsavam. And I have told you, the Radhashtami Utsavam every year is different, you see. And because that's the beauty, that's the diversity, that's the license given by Bhakti Sampradaya to allow your wings of imagination or bhava. Real imagination is bhava. And it allows the wings of bhava to fly in the vast horizons of rasa. You see. That's the beauty of Bhakti. That's why when you see our Guru Maharaj or any other Rasikacharya who follow Vrindavana Sampradaya or Chitrakuta Sampradaya or Ayodhya Sampradaya, typically they are very Rasikacharyas. The way in which they do Archana, the way in which they pick a flower and offer it to Bhagavan's feet itself is beautiful. And last week we had a small chat with our younger brothers and sisters, the Kishora group, where we discussed when we do something, let's give our full attention. Let's do it as finely, as beautifully possible. And not just for the appreciation or likes of people. That's, I think, the most, I'm sorry to use this word, I know you're very much used to social media's recognition, etc. It's a very depraved way of looking at work, where I am expecting somebody to give a clap or give a pat or give a like or a heart sign in my post, etc. We make our life second hand, right? It becomes second hand. Now I'm craving for other people's likes, and no harm in that, but I don't think that should be the primary one. When we have a work, can't I get the joy of doing the work finely, doing the work the best of my competency, or best of my ability? And I call it as excellence. And perfection is, of course, the goal, but excellence is the aspiration for perfection in action is excellence, isn't it? So each of us have our own excellences, and it's a journey. It's a open journey where we tend to get there, and that's the beauty of Bhakti Marga, that we do things finely. When we write an essay, we don't just write the facts. We want to give some wonderful poetic expressions, not just for people's appreciation. Let it come, let it not come. I'll be happy if people appreciate, obviously, but that should not be the guiding goal. The guiding goal is there is Krishna in me, who is inspiring me to say sing well, or to write a poem well, or to speak about a point in a very fine and a very lyrical way, etc. And that act itself is so fulfilling, it itself is so joyful. And see this wonderful virtuous loop. You all know vicious loop, right? Where we go deeper and deeper into mess. The more I go deeper, faster I go inside is a vicious circle. The opposite of a vicious cycle is virtuous cycle, because the opposite of vice is virtue, isn't it? So there is a virtuous cycle where I try a little bit and then I'm elevated. So I try with the best of that ability, I go even more elevated. And soon it becomes exponential growth in my own inner excellence. So like that, when we keep doing things in a more fine way, you see, and I have seen some people, even if they do small things, they do it with tremendous love, care, and finesse, right? For example, a cake. I've seen many of our own brothers and sisters when I was going around in America. Even if they make a cake, they cut it beautifully, it looks good, it's presented properly, they have a nice topping. Why? Because that's the love, that's the care, that's excellence in action. And the way they eat, the way they speak, there are some very fine people, Rasikas, and it's a joy to be with them. And of course, our Guru Maharaj is one such finest of all Rasikacharyas. It's always a joy to be with him, speak with him, and just be with him. And he teaches us loads of Bhagavata Dharma without speaking a word. And that's the beauty of such Rasikacharyas. Their presence is in us. So here, that's how poetry is, that's how lyric is, and Bhagavatam is the storehouse of great rasa. And there is something in poetry which is very poignant and which is very important, whether it is storytelling or poetry. And I remember in school, I guess, or maybe in college, I don't know, at some point of time, I saw this by Ernest Hemingway. You must have heard about it, right? And since we are more exposed to such English literature, let me use that as a segue to enter into our finest, no comparison to all these Aprameyam, which is our Bhagavatam, but just as a segue so that we can relate Bhagavatam. There is an art of short story, as some of you might be aware, and this is the short story. I'm going to write a short story for you, for sale. Babies' shoes, never worn. That's the story. Shorter story. Now, if you are a person who is a Rasika, a person who can discern, what does this simple 6 words tell you? For sale. Baby shoes, never worn. It looks like a very trite, very commonplace, very dull sign, isn't it? Then we allow our thoughts, Because we know it's a short story, we ask this question, why are they selling baby shoes? And where is this sign actually posted? Is it a shop or a house? And then comes the question, who is selling it? And then comes the most poignant of all questions. Why are they selling it? Why should they buy baby shoes? And it was never worn. Now I won't tell you the story further. The rest, your heart will tell you. You get the drift of what's happening, isn't it? This is the power of what is called as suggestiveness. Okay? And there is a power in suggestiveness. The older the culture, the more spiritual the culture, the more Rasika the culture, greater would be its capability of suggestiveness, allowing our heart to expand into those unspoken words which are far more poignant than this too much verbosity. And that's the beauty of suggestiveness. And in Sanskritam, it's called dhvani. Dhvani. I don't know how many of you speak your native tongue at home, or you have your grandmother or grandfather or elderly people at home who prefer your Indian language or Indian oriented language compared to English. If you had been with such people, they use such things, some very fine aesthetic words, very fine spiritual words, very fine powerful words of ancient traditions are used casually, you see, in our languages, because the culture is so old that even an unlettered person, unlettered in the sense completely oblivious of spiritual traditions or books or texts, etc., even that person uses a language which can baffle the greatest philosopher of some other country. Why? Because it's in the culture. And a word has its own ecosystem. Do you get what I'm saying? The world has its own ecosystem around it. And as we soak deeper into the culture, only then we can understand the actual ecosystem of that word. Otherwise, it's a dry, dead thought, isn't it? But it's not so when it comes to very ancient cultures. So here, there is something called dhvani. And I gave you an example. It's called Nicha Upamanam in Sanskritam. Unfortunately, I need to use our English Sahitya for that. Why unfortunate? A Rasika is a Rasika of everything, including poetry and excellent pieces in all languages. But when we talk about, say, Bhagavatam, etc., to compare to that, obviously, there is no compare to all this, isn't it? So look at this wonderful short story. For sale, baby shoes never worn. Can you feel the pathos? Pathos na Karunya Rasa. There are some singers and dancers in our group out here. So in Bharatanatyam, I'm sure they teach a theory also about Navarasas and other bhavas, etc. So there is this Karunya Rasam. There is a sense of pathos. Pathos means Shoka Rasam. And if you are a Rasika and if you allow your imagination to flow, incidentally, one of the unarguably or inarguably brightest minds of the West, Albert Einstein, said that imagination is far more greater than knowledge. You see? Because most of the final frontiers of science cannot be solved by knowledge. It cannot be, obviously, because it's a frontier. You need to go beyond. And knowledge will never allow you to cross the frontier. So you actually need imagination. And that's what many of these bright minds of quantum physics or bright minds of fundamental research are doing. They're imagining. They're trying to imagine so that they can pose a problem and try to see if they can experiment to find a proper proof, either to prove it or disprove it, you see. So here, imagination. So if you allow your imagination, is that Rasika? So when you look at the board, your imagination, if it is triggered, then you are a Rasika and you can develop it also. There was a writer whom our Guruji loves a lot, likes a lot. And he used to say that writer used to tell Guruji, it's a very famous writer, he said, every person is a very interesting and a gripping story. And the challenge for a Rasika writer is to actually see the story, even when the person who is living the story doesn't see it. So he sees it in a way which is very different from the way in which the person whose story he is writing may not even see it. That's how beautiful a Rasika's eyes are. And so let us come back to what is called as suggestiveness, dhvani, implications, etc. So there are some words which may tell a story, and I believe there is an excellent Sanskrita poetry, and I'm not competent to read and understand it because it's a very high Sanskrit, called Naishadam, written by a great poet called Harsha. And he has written a wonderful poetry called Naishadam. And some of our Sanskrit scholars in our Satsanga used to tell me that the actual meaning of the verses in Naishadam is something, but what it is implying would be totally something else. You see, and unless I understand with the imagination of the poet, I miss the point totally. That's the beauty of suggestiveness. That's the rasa. And more greater the poetry is, dhvani needs to be even more well refined. It has to give that suggestion. It has to allow your heart to sort of light up with imagination so that you catch the suggestion, right? And one of the typical way in which suggestiveness is brought out is by commentaries. And see, for example, this is very famous. Most of you know Tiruppavi, and I'm sure many of you know Tamil. So let me use the suggestiveness of Tamil and how a commentator sort of decoded it. And our Swamiji loves this example. We all know Tiruppavi was written by Sri Andal, Godanachya. And in that he says, Mayyittu Malarittu Naam Mudiyum, Mayyittu Ezhudom, Malarittu Naam Mudiyum. What it means is, Mai is collyrium, or what you call eyeliner. Okay. And Anjanam. So all the Gopis, they say, let us all do a small pious vratam. In this vratam means you follow some rules which generally you won't like to follow in normal days. But for the special days, because of piety, I actually follow some rules, and we call vratam. Ekadasi is a vratam because we generally need to avoid eating too much or eating rice, etc. on Ekadasi. And generally we want to eat rice on other days. So on that day we force ourselves not to eat, hence it becomes a vratam. So all these Gopis say, let us do vratam so that we all can attain the love for Bhagavan Sri Krishna. In this vratam, what do we do? Let us, take a holy vow that we will not apply eyeliner during this time. And then another Gopi said, let us not wear any flowers. Okay. Eyeliners won't be applied. Second word is, let us not wear any flowers. You see, Malarittu Naam Mudiyum. Malar means flower. Ittu means to actually wear it. Naam Mudiyum. We shall not put or we shall not wear flowers during this vratam. Here the operative term which needs stress is, we shall not. You see, Malarittu Naam Mudiyum. And the way in which they keep the Naam is not Naam Malarittu Mudiyum. Then it is in the simple, we shall not wear the flowers. But in Sanskritam, in Tamil and all, you have this license of flowers we shall not wear. You see, which means if Krishna decides to play with us and brings a lovely, 1 meter of jasmine flower to adorn my tresses, adorn my hair, how can I say no to it? I'm doing all this piety, I'm doing all this vratam only for Krishna. Na? So here the commentator says, look at the suggestiveness of one word which appears harmless, but you need to be a gopi to understand the significance of that one word. Malar meaning flower, it means wear, naam means we, Mudiyo. We shall not fasten the flowers in our hair. So, Malaritte Naam Mudiyo. See, the suggestiveness is the miracle, is the wonder of this poetry. You understand this now, right? So, suggestiveness can come from an entire scenario, like the story which I just showed you. This is clearly the whole thing together suggests something. It's a story in 6 words, and your imagination can go deeper and deeper and deeper. That's the power of the short story, the shorter story, I guess. And then there is this suggestiveness which comes from words, and there is a suggestiveness which comes from nature. The suggestiveness of nature is beautiful. Generally, we use it even in our normal day-to-day novels. Okay, normal stories also they use. For example, when a person entered the room, or when a person entered a stadium where there is a finals of say football happening, just for example, a person writes the entire stadium was electric with excitement. No, the stadium was not electric. The electricity of excitement is not outside in the stadium. It is inside the heart of everyone sitting in the stadium. You see? So we generally superimpose, or we rather extrapolate, or we rather extend what is inside to outside. That's a very common suggestiveness we use. But then the trick of suggestiveness is to realize that whatever I'm showing as outer nature stuff can also mean a collective inner nature also. You understand this? Outer nature means that which is outside. That's the beauty. Outside and inside, we see unity in Sanatana Dharma. And so we call it nature, Prakriti. So there is nature outside, there is nature inside. So when you say nature outside, you say the air was cool and the whole ambience, we say, was friendly. All this is external nature. Internal nature, we all know, by nature is very ill-tempered, by nature she is very kind, etc. So inner and outer nature. So here, especially when it comes to Vrindavanam, especially when it comes to Krishna Bhakti, you got to be a Rasika, otherwise there is no place for any of these people in Krishna Bhakti. If you are not a Rasika, then you have missed the point in Krishna Bhakti. You see? And so that's the reason why we find a handful of Krishna Bhaktas. You see? Because it's very rare to find a person who has this tremendous capability to appreciate relish and derive joy from it. So there are a handful of Krishna Bhaktas. And generally the most refined people become Krishna Bhaktas. They have to, you see. That's how they are. They have to be a Krishna Bhakta. And so that's the reason why Bhagavatam, the reason why our Skanda Prasad ji, Sharada ji, and all your teachers in your respective places are saying read Bhagavatam daily, etc., is because it can bring that transformation in you. Slowly you become a Rasika. And you can actually see the change only when you can reflect back and try to understand how I was some time back, how am I now, and you'll find a veil of difference, the way in which you look at things, the way in which you enjoy small things. That's the metamorphosis, if you can use the term, of Bhagavatam. Okay, let me go back to our Venu Gitam, which is what I promised we will quickly see. This is in the 21st chapter of the 10th volume, or the 10th canto of Bhagavatam. We all know it. Most of you would have by-hearted it by now. Sweet sounding. And this is Shuka Muni telling this description of Venu Gitam. We all know what Venu Gitam is, right? It is the wonderful music of the flute, of obviously the flautist, which is Sri Muralidhara, or Sri Bhagavan Sri Krishna, Thakurji. So music of the flute is now verbalized. Is it possible? A music of a flute is ittam saras. Where is the music of the flute? No. This actually describes what happens when Bhagavan plays the flute. That is Venu Gitam now. Now, Krishna's Venu Gitam is playing the flute, right? And the Bhagavatam's Venu Gitam is the Gopis relishing Bhagavan Sri Krishna playing the flute. You see, unless you are in the stature of a gopi, even Krishna's Venu Gitam won't impact us much. But when we see the Venu Gitam through the heart of a gopi, that's when we get bhakti. You know why we need a guru to progress in bhakti? We need to see a guru who lives bhakti, that inspires us more bhakti than Bhagavan himself. And this bhakti is towards Bhagavan only. Even Bhagavan himself cannot inspire much bhakti. But a great guru, an acharya, just being with them. I'll give you an example. When you are with such an acharya, and somebody is telling a katha, say Ramayana katha, you can actually see the heart of your acharya melting from his face, from his gestures, from his eyes. Tears will flow. Words will break, voice will break. Why? And when you see that, that inspires bhakti 1,000,000 times more than me listening to Ramayana 1,000,000 times. But when I am with a Rasikacharya who is relishing Ramayana, bhakti comes just like that. Anubhava Purvam. You see, this is what is our experience because we have been with the Rasikacharyas now. So when our Guru Maharaj listens to a song and relishes it, our capability to relish it and appreciate it becomes millionfold. Or rather, that's when we can truly appreciate it, rather than us in an isolated way trying to appreciate something. So when Bhagavan Sri Krishna plays the flute, Bhagavatam is telling us, you see, now you be with me, slowly, this is the depth of Rasa. Bhagavatam is telling us how Krishna played the flute, but that's not enough. Bhagavatam is telling us how the entire ambience of Vrindavana up to Devaloka, even the higher lokas, how they reacted to Bhagavan playing the flute. Even that's not enough for us. It goes one step further and says, now Bhagavan is playing the flute, the entire universe is responding to the waves of love emanating from the flute. And that is being captured in the heart of the gopis, and the gopis are telling now what is happening. Now that's going to be a little interesting for us. It gives us bhakti. And to top it all, how gopis are relishing this Venu Gitam is being spoken by a great Rasikacharya called Shuka Muni, which makes the rasa even more greater. And that when our Guru Maharaj does as a pravachan, you have the highest rasa. Now you see how deep it is going. Krishna playing the flute, entire universe responding to that, which is how we get a little ripple in our heart. And then this universe responding to our flute of Bhagavan, seen by the gopi and spoken by a gopi or a group of gopis, becomes the real Venu Gitam. And then explaining the heart of gopis and then the words of gopis by Shuka Muni makes Venu Gitam even more relishable. Then all of this is explained, like how our Swamiji has explained sloka after sloka to us. Then the rasa, the anubhava is complete. Just the Shuka Uvacha inspires so much imagination in the heart of a Rasikacharya. Sri Shuka Uvacha. Shuka Muni, this mind-born or the yogic son of our Vyasa Bhagavan, starts to explain Venu Gitam. This is one of the highest of all refined relishes, Venu Gitam. And so, how he starts it is, he does not say, Krishna took out his flute and started playing. That's not how our Rasa works. He first explains the ambience. He explains the external natural ambience, which suggests internal ambience of love of Gopis to actually relish Venu Gitam. Otherwise, we can't relish Venu Gitam. Venu Gitam can be relished only when you see it in the heart of a gopi. So, which means I need to take us all to the heart of a gopi. Na? How can I take to the heart of a gopi? How Shuka Muni does is, Vrindavanam is the heart of a gopi. You all know this Madhura Gitam. Vrindavaname Vumaname Leelagal Nadandidum Dinam Diname Vrindavaname Vumaname. Of course, there is this wonderful Vrindavanam near Mathura, where Bhagavan played and herded his cows, etc. But the real Vrindavanam is in the heart of all of us. It is in the heart of a Rasika Chari. It is in the heart of Gopis. Vrindavaname Munmaname. And so, our Shuka Muni starts Venu Gitam with a wonderful description of an apparently external Vrindavanam, which is suggestive of the internal prema of all the Gopis, and it is the internal Vrindavana of Gopi prema. And now when you look at Ittam Sarasvachajalam Padmagara Sugandhina Nyavishad Vayuna Vatam Sago Gopala Kochutaka Ittam Sarasvachajalam. And for prema to actually flower, there has to be the clarity of jnana, isn't it? Generally. Vrindavana is exception to everything, but generally, when you are clear about a purpose, then love has space to flower in our heart. And here, what I would request you is, go back, read the English meaning which you have been given. Now, try to imagine the suggestive inner ambience of a gopi through the spoken external ambience of Vrindavana. And that would give us a tremendous insight into how Rasa works. Okay, that we shall do it, and you all shall do it, and we'll come back maybe next week or next to next week. We will decide that with this kind of disciple, and then discuss this wonderful Rasa of Venu Gitam. Sarvatra Govinda Nama Sankirtanam Govinda Govinda Sadguru Maharaj Ki Jai. Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare